Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first in a regular series of webinars that the Carbon Trust are going to be hosting over the coming year, called Inside Sustainability. My name is James Persad, and I'm Brand and Marketing Manager here at the Carbon Trust. I have spent 15 years in marketing and advertising, working both in creative agencies as a director across many brands, many media channels and different sectors, and also client side here at the Carbon Trust for 4 years. And I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague today, Associate Director Laura Timlin. And Laura has led our client carbon reduction strategy successes for the Carbon Trust over the past 9 years. For those of you who don't know, the Carbon Trust are an international mission-driven, not-for-profit organisation, our mission being to accelerate the move to a global low-carbon and sustainable economy. We have worked with over 75% of the FTSE 100, over 3,000 public sector organisations in the UK, and 9 national governments and counting, including Brazil, Mexico, China, South Africa and South Korea. And we help our clients to design, prioritise and execute activities that have helped them to date reduce their carbon emissions by 47 million tonnes and in the process save them £4.5 billion worth of costs. So, today we're here to present to you our latest thinking on how organisations can take a more holistic view towards brand protection by looking through an environmental lens, with your brand experts, your procurement experts and your sustainability experts. This is the agenda for the day. So, in a nutshell, what we're going to do is bring you the perspective from these different areas of the business. Historically, they've had little to do with each other, but we foresee far greater collaboration in the future as momentum builds around corporate understanding of the cost benefits, and not only the cost benefits, but the brand benefits of preparing and organising your business to operate as efficiently as possible now and in the future, or to put it another way, to truly take sustainability inside your business model. I'm going to kick off with the point of view from the brand and marketing experts, and Laura will then pick up on the procurement and sustainability experts. The brand and marketing team typically spend the majority of their time trying to do one of 3 things, and those are, number 1, raising awareness of the products and services that the business or organisation offers. Number 2, driving leads and interest into the business. Or number 3, retaining and driving loyalty from existing customers. However, a smaller but equally critical role of the brand and marketing team has always been to make sure that their wider business and associated partners are adhering to correct, consistent and proper use of the brand assets available to them. And if necessary, one of our team are often required to intervene in order to make sure that something off-brand or heinous looking or sounding doesn't make it out of the door and into the public domain. But it's pretty clear that the biggest brand experience any customer has is in the consumption or experience of the actual product or service being sold. And recent history demonstrates, for example, with the horse meat scandal, which has developed into a full-blown sector-wide supply chain crisis, that the importance of understanding what ingredients go into your products and services has never been more important for a brand reputation risk perspective. This is especially the case for FMCG brands, which consumers are buying on a regular basis, and in the case of food and drink and some pharmaceuticals, are taking into their own or their families' bodies. These sorts of crises and others, for example the baby milk powder scandal, the palm oil scandal, and ongoing product recalls, can effectively ruin years of hard work from the branding and marketing team by eroding the reputation and favourability scores that have often been painstakingly nurtured over the months and years by that team. Just ask Gerald Ratner. So a lot of damage can be done to your brand through poor product governance. And that's why it's ever more important for brand and marketing teams to understand what specific ingredients are going into the products and services that you sell. A major breach of trust with your customers or shareholders can sometimes spell the end of the line for individual employees, business areas, and occasionally entire brands. And the risk has increased dramatically with the proliferation of social media tools such as Twitter and Facebook that enable communications to go around the world at the speed of light. Truly, no brand is safe in this world if they are cutting corners in their supply chain. Public trust in all sorts of institutions, including business, politics and the media, has been at an all-time low for a number of years, having been eroded by various well-known scandals. The signs are there that this trust is stabilising, and that brand guardians need to do much more to make sure that this trust is respected and fed and watered to ensure that it blooms. Edelman, Corporate Affairs Agency, recently published their annual Global Trust Barometer, and they reported that the #1 reason consumers said they trusted businesses less over the past year was because the wrong incentives were driving business decisions. We interpret that as meaning that businesses put profits over good enough product and service delivery. So we think it's no longer good enough from a governance perspective for brand guardians to claim ignorance of what's going on in the wider business from a reputational and environmental risk perspective. The technology and retail brands employing workers overseas in Asian supply chains have suffered reputational damage over the welfare of these employees. Another example are car brands, who regularly end up having to recall a model because of the corporate drive as to get brand new cars to market without the nuts and bolts being properly road tested. And it's all very well having a crisis management plan in place, but by that time it's often too late and the brand damage is being done. A trusted brand takes an age to develop and a moment to destroy. It is the brand team's responsibility to poke their noses in, often where they're not necessarily wanted, to ensure that the organisation remains honest to its customers and its stakeholders and behaves in a way that is sustainable. Taking responsibility for breaches of trust often applies to CEOs, as we've seen in the banking and petrochemical world, and perhaps should also apply to heads of marketing and branding, who are uniquely positioned in their organisations, with the media budgets at their command, to ensure that good brand governance practices and suitable corporate behaviour is taking place across the organisation and deep into their supply chains. And this is especially the case with the tools and expertise now available to help guide these supply chain interrogations and make them relatively simple to conduct, even across a very large organisation with an extremely complex supply chain and into its customers' use and disposal of the products or services they buy from them. One way that corporates manage risk typically is through the introduction and management of a risk register. And environmental health and safety risks are often at the top of these risk registers, and they're a classic method of monitoring a variety of risk likelihoods and impact levels within an organisation. However, ownership of these registers is often only confined to compliance or company secretariat roles, which do not traditionally contain the deeper understanding of the brand risks required to appropriately judge certain operational risks from a potential brand damage perspective. it would be wise for heads of brands to ensure they're involved in the development of the environmental health and safety risks being measured and reviewed, and also in the monitoring and scoring process of each risk as it oscillates over time, as they may well be able to spot the impending brand risk sooner than other members of the team. At this point, they need to clearly describe the brand value at risk resulting from the risk identified and go and communicate this in writing and verbally with the appropriate colleagues to ensure that they're left in no doubt about the potential consequences if the risk materialises. In this way, wider team members will understand more about the brand risks associated with their activities, the impact that these can have on their roles and in other parts of the business or suppliers' businesses, and take the appropriate steps to mitigate against them before they happened. These wider team members should specifically include the procurement team and the sustainability team, and it's those teams that my colleague Laura is now going to talk to you about, and I'll just hand over to Laura.
Thanks, James. So to recap, a brand is often a company's most valuable asset. It provides a shorthand way of communicating, both internally and externally, the company's values, what their products and services do, and how their products differentiate from their competitors. Brands need to encompass all aspects of a business's activity, and as such, environmental performance is becoming an important criteria to integrate into a brand's identity. That said, there are relatively few, if any, brands where there are direct lines of communication established between the brand and sustainability teams, and even fewer examples of where brand teams have fully evaluated the environmental risks with the potential to damage their reputation and business value. A brand is more than the company itself. It also encapsulates the often complex global supply chains that sit behind, support, or deliver services on the company's behalf. So much like the imperative to have good communication channels between the brand and sustainability teams, companies should also invest time and resources in establishing communication channels between the sustainability teams and the procurement teams, ensuring that the brand team are also part of the dialogue. By creating these lines of communication, companies can not only identify, evaluate, and manage the environmental risks associated with these aspects of their business, but it also presents them the opportunity to explore new ways in which they can differentiate their offer. In order to learn further and to integrate the sustainability, brand and supply chains, companies are increasingly creating collaborative learning processes so that together these teams can evaluate the sustainability of the full value chain they control. Building on James's reference to the horse meat scandal, according to some recent research conducted by Kantar found that nearly half of us changed our shopping habits shortly after the horse meat scandal story broke, proving that surprises in your supply chain, poor supplier selection, or poor supplier performance can lead to material damage to your business. Interestingly, following the scandal, Tesco Chief Executive Philip Clark pledged to increase orders of UK-sourced meat from 20 to 90%. Alongside this commitment, he ordered a review of the company's relationships with suppliers so that these could be made more transparent and collaborative. The reaction to the horse meat scandal has resulted in growing the prominence of procurement professionals, and for some forward-thinking firms, procurement and supply chain professionals are starting to be seen as having a key role in brand stewardship, both in the short and long term. Procurement and supply chain management is particularly important for those companies whose material environmental impacts happen outside their company boundary, i.e. those companies in carbon terms who have large scope 3 emissions, the indirect emissions, in comparison to their scope 1 and 2 emissions, their direct emissions. As purchased goods and services is often the largest scope 3 category, there is a real opportunity for companies to improve their reputation and profile by investing in supplier relationships and buying wisely. If you have poor resource management in your supplier base, ultimately these inefficiencies will lead to reputational risks and increase the probability of future cost increases of what you buy, which in turn impacts the price that you can sell at. So it's a no-brainer from both a brand and cost perspective that companies seek to ensure that these risks are appropriately addressed. Here at the Carbon Trust, we use carbon as a proxy metric to measure environmental sustainability. By investigating your supply chain, i.e. how your products and services are made, delivered and disposed of, you will be able to identify areas for improvement and optimization. Often it's the simple steps, such as improving the ordering process, for example in a food business, so that orders are placed exactly for what you need, i.e. focusing on improving the internal business processes and systems so that you in turn can improve your forecasting and customer insights, so that ultimately the business can be more accurate in predicting demand. So taking the food example, this helps reduce food waste, therefore cutting carbon and in turn improving environmental performance. Taking a look at what leading companies say about engaging with suppliers, Carbon Trust undertook a survey of 100 multinational companies back in August 2011. When asked, interestingly, 9% of those surveyed said they had already selected their suppliers based on their carbon performance, with a further 39% expected to do so within the near future. Then when asked about whether companies had deselected suppliers based on carbon performance or intended to do so, 7% responded that they already did, with a further 29% expecting and planning to. These figures should be particularly interesting to brand and marketing teams in business-to-business companies, as this is a clear, direct signal that large corporates will in the near future, if they're not doing so already, expect supply companies to communicate their sustainability credentials to them. Part of which will be to demonstrate that they have conducted a full risk assessment and put plans in place to mitigate the risks they've identified. Those companies who go further and achieve verification or certification of their performance against a recognised standard, such as the Carbon Trust Carbon Standard or the Carbon Trust Water Standard, will be in a good position to maintain their business and potentially grow market share by winning new contracts from competitors who are deselected due to non-compliance. The procurement and sustainability perspectives are very much interlinked. For today's discussion, we're taking the approach that as sustainability professionals, the sustainability team need to equip themselves with the communication and engagement techniques that the brand and communication teams already deploy in their roles. This way, They will be ready to support and guide their procurement colleagues when the time comes. With this in mind, how do sustainability teams practically implement a supply chain engagement programme? There's 4 key steps companies should take. Firstly, develop a hotspot footprint to identify value chain risks. Secondly, use this hotspot to understand the hidden interdependencies and then analyse how these areas can be tackled. Thirdly, map the hotspots in the value chain to climate stress. And fourthly, start initially with the Tier 1 and Tier 2 suppliers, but don't forget to profile the risks right out to Tier 3, 4 and ultimately 5. There are, of course, challenges in developing and implementing a supplier engagement strategy. These challenges broadly fall into 4 areas. Where do you start? i.e., how do you gather the right data to understand where you are now and what the opportunities might be? Which suppliers do you engage with? i.e., how do you categorise those suppliers and what strategy do you want to employ? Do you want to work with all suppliers or just those that have the largest impacts? What approach should you take? i.e., what are the rules of engagement and how much do you want to guide the suppliers themselves? And finally, how do you measure success? What does the success look like and how do you report progress? As with all of these types of interactions, at the heart of the challenge is how you communicate in order to achieve your stated aims. Again, calling on the expertise that sits within the brand teams themselves should help ensure that consistent brand messages are being communicated and your overall brand outcomes are delivered against. Over the next couple of slides, you'll be able to see some examples of the tactical steps that companies can take to secure, maintain and manage supplier relationships. Setting up partner hubs where companies can share information, find content, advice, or perhaps developing workshops and toolkits to help guide and nudge key suppliers into the actions that you want them to take are examples of tools that really work. But perhaps for those suppliers who are smaller or have less of an impact in terms of sustainability for you, maybe it's just a question of signposting them to self-help guides so that they can do the work themselves. Finally, before we summarise our thoughts today, it's worth taking a quick look at a couple of examples of companies who are taking a leadership position in respect to supplier engagement. Our first case study is BT. BT have been working on supplier engagement for many years as part of their sustainability strategy. They've taken the view that they wish to engage with all of their 18,200 suppliers. To support this engagement and to make clear what they're asking their suppliers to do, they've launched a sustainable supplier policy. And to support the policy, they've also delivered training workshops which help set out the simple steps companies needed to take in order to comply with the policy. Whitbread, on the other hand, have taken a different approach. They seek to engage most closely with the suppliers who have the biggest impact on their environmental footprint. By working with these companies, they've been able to assess appropriate reduction targets, and by working with them, this has given them the confidence to disclose these reduction targets publicly. Everyone now knows what they're jointly working towards. James will now summarise the presentation.
Thank you, Laura. So, just to bring this all together at the end, before we take any questions you might have, we wanted to sort of leave you with 5 things to take away into your organisations. And these are about sharing your thinking. So, what do you think can be done to improve sustainability inside your own organisations? Communicating this with appropriate team members, in particular your marketing teams, your procurement teams and your sustainability teams. Making sure that you get together regularly to update each other on progress, monitor each other's business areas and share knowledge. And in this way we hope to improve education about each other's roles, where you perceive risks to be in your specific area, and create an understanding of mutual risks so that even in your own daily life you're able to appreciate the supply chain risks of your colleagues and other areas and how those might impact on the brand. So thank you very much. That's the end of the webinar. Please do, if you have any questions, we've got about 15 minutes to take questions. If you want to write anything in, please do. I'm going to put the microphone on mute so that I'm able to discuss any questions that come through with Laura, and we will write back to you within the next 15 minutes. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.